For better or worse, I have recently gotten back into playing Dead by Daylight, and with that comes interesting experiences with the newly added characters, fun new stuff I've never tried before, as well as some painful reminders as to why I stopped in the first place. Shortly before I took my big break, I actually made a list of killers I liked going against and ones that I didn't, and learned through doing so that at the time, I actually disliked roughly half of the killer roster, and that was my big epiphany. Since I've been enjoying the game a lot more recently, I'd figured that my list was probably a lot more positive than it was before. So this will be my reimagined ranking for the killers of DBD by how much fun I have facing them from worst to best. I have a lot of hours on this game, however no, it does not make me good at it. So I'm sure you'll be seeing all manner of skill issues in my list and suboptimal gameplay in the background. I also mostly play solo and duo queue, so that factors into some of my thoughts. However, while I might complain about all sorts of characters, I am not the type of person to disconnect and leave my teammates with a bot. I'm always trying to learn and play my matches out. Regardless, make sure to remind me how bad I am at the game in the comments, and enjoy the video. Starting off in the F tier with the killers that I actively dread playing against due to how frustrating and or boring they are. I almost never enjoy matches with them. And at the very bottom of my list is the Spirit. As someone that has hearing complications, it's not surprising that I hate the Spirit. I will never be able to hear her as well as she can hear me, at least not while remaining comfortable. But even back when I had full headphone access, she was never fun to face. The Spirit can spend anywhere between 5 seconds at base to 9.5 seconds with add-ons in her power, making constant readjustments at high speed to account for the plays you're trying to make. Even if she uses up the entire thing and you avoid her, it recharges in anywhere between 15 seconds to a mere 9 seconds with add-ons, which makes dying to even just an okay Spirit feel pretty much inevitable. A lot of her 50-50 mind game scenarios feel more like 80-20s if I'm being honest, and not even that against the players with god headsets that have memorized every sound in the game. I try to walk, fake vaults, slow vault, drop items to trick them, it never seems to work if they're any good. I've seen videos of Spirit players with the volume so high that they can hear a stationary character's breathing as loud as I can hear grunts of pain. When she chases you normally, she can also end up getting free hits because the passive phasing messes with your reaction time. And on top of everything, since her power is only a means to secure an M1 and not a special attack, all amounts of exposed perks, Sloppy Butcher, Save the Best for Last, Surge, and all those other types of perks only serve to make her more powerful. What makes it worse is that, since again I have hearing problems, I can't theoretically start playing or maining this character to learn more about her and her counterplay like I could with the others. The one nice thing that I can say about the Spirit is that she's a 4.4 killer, which doesn't matter much in the context of a chase with her, but it's still good, because if they released a killer with this level of movement and chase potential later in the game's life cycle, something tells me they wouldn't be so generous. At number 39, I have the Trickster. This man has been in the game for 4 years, and no matter how many times I face him, I can rarely dodge knives for long outside of certain tiles. His power is very relentless, with small hitboxes that let him snag you through or over half of the obstacles in the game, and pretty forgiving for him to mess up with due to his ammo count. He's also a pretty solid camper, and yes, I acknowledge that camping, tunneling, and slugging are valid strats, but this is a fun tier list. Now, everything I just said, which is already obnoxious enough, is more or less how he was back when he'd only recently been added and considered pretty weak. Since then, he has received buffs in certain areas of his kit, such as becoming a 4.6 killer, making hugging smaller structures less effective since he can just waddle around it and smack you easier, and a crazy buff to his main event, making his camping and tunneling potential even more vile and allowing him to use it in pretty much every chase. The most effective counterplay in a lot of these scenarios, especially if he has the Ricochet add-on, is to just get in a locker and force him to cancel it. Seriously? Are we okay with that? Yeah, lockers also help against characters like Bubba, but usually as a last resort. Doing this against Trickster can sometimes be your only realistic option, and unless he has Iron Maiden, a completely free and non-interactive way to deal with him. The result is most Trickster chases, and by extension his matches, ranging from boring to extremely annoying. Number 38, the Knight. Holding W can hardly be considered engaging, and against the Knight that is pretty much all you'll ever be doing. While you do get some pointers as to where he'll place a guard, you're given little time to actually react to it, and from there you either run to the next tile or as far as you need to for it to despawn. And if you don't, then you most likely end up sandwiched between one lost health state and another, potentially even getting 2-tapped if you're unlucky. While grabbing the flag is an option, most knights will play around this, and I can't possibly recall the last time I was able to get one during a chase. But that isn't the only frustrating time to deal with them, as they can be put on gen patrol, and if you're just barely spotted by one, you'll need need to waste 5 seconds, or 10 with the jailer at minimum, before getting back to what you were doing, just because the knight decided to bother you. It doesn't sound like much, but when it keeps happening during the match, it really adds up. Opening the exit gate when you're last alive against this character is also extremely difficult due to the frequency of which guards can be used, the duration at which they can patrol, and the ability for the knight to waddle back over the moment he runs out of them anyway. Number 37, the Clown. I started playing this game for the first time either shortly before or after the release of The Clown, and in the 7 years since he's been out, I could not possibly recount a single genuinely fun match I've had against him. The constant spamming of hindered and haste with intrusive visual effects is maddening, and he promotes some of the most boring counterplay for survivors in pre-running, pre-dropping, and holding that sweet W key. He might have been tolerable enough for E tier due to how weak and simple he is, before every single Clown player found out that they can run 3 haste perks and save the best for last to make the 1v1 as miserable as possible. They've got some pretty toxic tendencies too. They are nerfing his hindered in the PTB, but you still can't fast vault, so I hardly care. And they're also buffing his haste to the point where some Clown players are saying it's probably worth just spamming them. Isn't that fantastic? Editing shifty here, they did actually release the update to live by the time I ended up making this video, and Clown is in a horribly annoying spot. I've only had to play against him once, but it was terrible. Number 36, the last of F tier, the Ghoul, also known as the Drool. I don't care how much this character was nerfed. I started playing again after all the nerfs, and I can confidently say that the Ghoul is still very annoying. He gets the same adrenaline, endurance, and syringe invalidation that Legion and Deathslinger do, while also being far stronger than them. He flies across the map in seconds, can catch up the moment you try to make distance, then cancel the power to down you in just a second. He can stagger you at windows and pallets to vault them even faster and hit you before you make anything, and his first hit is almost always free on top of that with his point and click, somewhat auto-aim crosshair that reaches you from the other end of a tile. And don't forget that you can hold it for 5 seconds and get to try again if you miss, but you know, God forbid the Xenomorph can see where its own tail will go. And his cooldowns aren't really long enough to let you get vital distance like you would against many other killers in a lot of situations, being 8 seconds at maximum when not enraged, which you will be for most of the match, and that's only if you use up all your tokens. Even Blight gets 10 seconds max and it takes longer to recover from your fumble. Matter of fact, sometimes when Kaneki fails the grab attack because there's something blocking him, you still get marked, get locked for a moment, and he's able to M1 instantly. This is all while being a relatively easy killer to pick up too, making him probably the most played killer again just a month after the biggest license came to the game. The Ghoul's only redeeming factors are the power delay after breaking pallets, letting you actually get some seconds of distance if he does, though I swear they don't work half the time when I play as or against him, and his constant injures giving me some fat autodidact value as I am that perk's strongest soldier, occasionally letting me heal someone in the same time it took the Ghoul to injure them. Otherwise, he sucks to play against. Like Clown, he could have been E tier I suppose, and I'd probably prefer him to some of the killers in E tier depending on my mood, but I face him so often that him merely existing in the game is getting incredibly tiresome, and the sounds he makes piss me off, so I think he deserves an F for that. Kicking off E tier, which consists of killers I generally groan at having to play against but aren't quite as horrible and matches with them can end up being at least decent, is the Nurse. Now you can actually win mind games against the Nurse, but this is almost entirely invalidated if they have aura reading. She's the strongest character in the game with the ability to phase through anything, ignoring almost every defense that survivors use against other killers. You survive both through guesswork and holding W for as much distance as possible. The former can be satisfying, but having to make her pick wrong every few seconds just to last a little longer in chase is still irritating in itself. Nurses also have a tendency to show up the moment I equip a build or challenge dedicated to stunning the killer or taking hits. At the very least, her chases in games tend not to last too long, so you don't really have to suffer as much, but like, it's Nurse, dude. Number 34, the Houndmaster. Would it be fair to argue that Pinhead was powercrapped by this character? Sure, she doesn't have a box for game slowdown, but makes up for it with pretty solid map traversal and a power that I feel is superior in almost every way. It can be redirected to hit you, she takes control again faster, putting more pressure on you as you make a lot less distance when she misses, you get grabbed for far longer and can't control your movement nearly as much, only being able to get rid of it before she reaches you if you use up a pallet or have a teammate, you can't slow vault windows like with Pinhead, and it can also injure and down you by itself over some vaults and apply deep wound if marked, all while having the same cooldown time as Pinhead's chains, and it sucks. I haven't played against many Houndmasters, and I suppose it isn't that hard to dodge the dodge hog, but those few matches were still dull and frustrating regardless. Number 33, the Blight. Now people that play Blight are very impressive, and he has more fair counterplay options than other strong annoying killers, but that is about all I can give him. He has an extremely oppressive chase and travel power, showing up anywhere on the map in seconds, and even when you play around his positioning and predict him well, special tricks can have him snag you anyway. Are you on a tile he can't play around as easily? No bother. He'll just walk you down with the full M1 speed despite his power's potential. I think he desperately needs the pallet breaking cooldowns that Ghoul has. But you know, I generally don't hate the Blight's power. That would be too strong of a word for it. The reason he's not more tolerable than the E tier is because Blight players are some of the biggest sweats ever. Tunneling, slugging, camping, meta perks, Blights are the final bosses of all of them. If you can't handle being tunneled out at 1 or 2 gens by mid-tier killers, I pray that you don't get Blights often, because it will happen to you at 5 gens, and you won't be ready. They're also often both sore losers and sore winners. I've met more Blight players with massive egos than every M1 killer combined. Number 32, the Lich. My hatred might stem from a complete oversaturation of him since the, in my opinion, mostly unnecessary buffs that he got, but I just do not like this character's kit at all. He can now zoom across the map and around loops every 20 seconds, which lets him land on you and hit you almost for free if you're not near a vault or pallet. He can then stop those pallets from being dropped, which can often get you hit if you don't pre-drop or have the specific item that lets you deal with it better, only for him to be able to disable that item with his sphere, which can also track survivors. But that wouldn't be so bad if it weren't accompanied by phasing projectiles that can be super tricky to judge and dodge on elevation, or with the add-on that spawns them at crouch height. And even if you're able to crouch them, a good Vecna will spawn them directly on top of you anyway with little to no time to react. His cosmetics and default look are also kinda garbage, so I'm not even getting annoyed in style, not a fan. Finally, last in E tier, number 31 is the Hag. She does have efficient jump scares at times, I'll give her that, but the forced camera changes, add-ons that allow you to hide the fact that traps are triggered, and the fact that she can feel like she's everywhere, especially while guarding a 3-gen, make this killer less than ideal to go up against, and that's without even mentioning the type of people that play her. Every Hag player will camp their hooks with traps, and then even if you avoid them, they'll just manually run back to tunnel the person anyway, and then for whatever reason, Hag players will blame their annoying power and boring playstyle on the survivors. Like, oh, you should have just been in a survive with friends and harassed the traps early before you even knew you were playing against this character. I would love to do that, but when I'm actually squatted up, I almost never get this killer, so I'm stuck with the lack of communication from randoms in almost every Hag game. And then sometimes when you do beat her efficiently in a squad, they complain because using Discord is overpowered. Okay, dude. On to the D tier, consisting of killers that are mostly acceptable for me to play against, just with more downsides than upsides that makes them less ideal. And first off, at number 30, is the Singularity. This killer is certainly intense, pushing M1 chasers to their very limit and giving counter options with his EMPs, which also promote team play. But I just do not like how oppressive and relentless this killer is. It takes mere seconds to get potted mid-chase, even after getting rid of the last one. Then it's a persistent game of pre-dropping and trying to break line of sight until you inevitably go down, get 5 seconds of breathing room due to a teammate, or exhaust every resource on the map. Stressful in a way that's almost a little fun, but ultimately not. I think he needs a longer TP cooldown, or a temporary immunity to being tagged after an EMP is used, and then I'd probably like him a lot more. Number 29, the Nightmare. Freddy's chase power is kind of like mixing the Clown with the Doctor, both of which I'm not really a fan of. It's not as bothersome as the Clown, but it's not as funny or interesting to play around as the Doctors can sometimes be either, though it's about as easy to spam as both of them. He also has multiple other abilities that I'm yet to get used to playing against, so my lack of experience with this iteration of the killer can lead to me having less fun as well. I'm really not liking his pallet explosions so far, for example. That being said, he's pretty inoffensive in comparison to killers from the tier below, and his players tend to be more prone to whiffing their swings, which can be pretty funny. He's also one of NOED's strongest soldiers, giving me value on counterforce since I use that perk decently often. Number 28, the Xenomorph. While the turrets allow for counter options against Xeno's chase and stealth abilities, they provide minimal satisfaction even when used efficiently. They aren't exactly fun or interactive for either the killer or the survivor, and if your teammates just hog them or place them in poor spots, you have to deal with Xeno at full force should you choose not to waste your time retrieving them. Doing so isn't particularly enjoyable either. As I mentioned before, I find Xeno's tail attack fairly hard to judge exactly where it will go on the killer's side, and it feels similarly poor for survivors. In comparison to many other attack indicators, it is more subtle in both its sounds and animations, as well as acting very quickly, which can make it difficult to work around, and the hitboxes and precision can also feel very wonky on it, hitting you where it definitely feels like it shouldn't. Number 27, ending off D tier, is the Huntress. Again, I very much respect the skill showcased by a lot of Huntress players, especially when not relying on aura reading. That being said, while I don't hate her power, she is still one of my least favourite projectile killers. Her zoning potential is insane, her hitboxes will never not be whack as hell, and nobody has fun when they're being back-revved by Iriehead. With the buffs to her ammo count, when playing against a Huntress, she either has to be pretty bad or you have to play super well to get any downtime from a reload. She's also really good at camping hooks, especially in the basement, which can force you to let your teammates die from their first hook if she plays into that. Hi there, sorry for the interruption. If you're enjoying this video, please head over to subscribe to my second channel, where most of my future DBD content will be uploaded. C tier is for the killers that tend to find a balance in their positive and negative aspects, or just end up being downright inoffensive. Starting with number 26, the good guy. Chucky's unique height can provide somewhat interesting and occasionally frustrating changes to your looping. His dash attack, while a little intimidating and not something I'm used to yet, still feels fair on the survivors. That being said, I still don't find him very engaging or fun overall. He can be super slippery sometimes when trying to protect teammates or get pallet stuns, and his size combined with his stealth can end up being a bit more irritating than it is scary. I rarely see him, so my lack of experience makes things a little muddy, but based on what I know so far, I think Chucky has the strong potential to either drop or climb tiers as I get used to him. Number 25, the Pig. Like Freddy, Amanda loves to whiff. She has a fun chase power to predict, and her stealth can be pretty spooky. She has one of the best stun sounds in the game, and her traps also give extra time to set up saves on downed survivors, which can prove to be incredibly useful in changing the tide of a match against her. These same traps though, while pretty inoffensive as game slowdown, can allow the Pig to guarantee free kills outside of hatch scenarios if she really wants to, which is unsurprisingly frustrating for both you and your teammates. The only upside to this is that opposed to typical tunneling, your team is more likely to just do gens and escape while she's occupied instead of trying to play the hero. Though with bad map RNG, plus add-ons and perks that make searching boxes harder, traps can just give her kills despite committing no extra time to you at all. This is just one notable fault in an otherwise solid killer though. The reason she's in C tier, and low down at that, is that once again this character just has some of the most annoying players. Pigs tend to go out of their way to make the match less fun for survivors, and then if you dare complain or even just ask them why they play like this, they'll tell you she's low tier and to get better, and that humping you on the ground for 2 minutes was absolutely mandatory to make up for the fact that she's not the nurse. And while a bit meta, her memes also just aren't funny, especially Boop the Snoot, which can often get you targeted, BM'd, and killed just because you didn't want to play into it. And then when you do play into it, half of the time she leaves you bleeding out on the floor anyway. That one guy on TikTok that finds cool ambush spots carries Pig's entire PR. Number 24, the Legion. I used to hate Legion, nowadays they're just kinda fine. Sure, their games can be a bit of a holding left click party with pretty free injures plus deep wound, on top of your random teammates not splitting up or mending early, but honestly that's all the problems Legion has aside from pre-running being a little boring to have to utilize. Once again, I get big autodidact value from this killer, and while healing is less necessary than it is against the ghoul, the potential 5-second heals still save a lot of hassle. On the somewhat uncommon occasion that you get a Legion to whiff their power, it is pretty damn funny, and chases with them after Frenzy are mostly just normal M1 chases which are completely fine. I'd argue their buffs made them more interesting, as now they can sometimes use power in the chase itself and you have to look out for that. I think Legion is in an okay spot, uninteresting but simple, and certainly not irritating outside of solo Q throwers and those builds where they just spam power to break pallets and block windows. Number 23, the Artist. It's hard to find much to say about the Artist, as she's probably the most okay killer there ever was. She's not OP or weak. Her power isn't fun to play around, but not exactly boring or unfair either. Not one piece of her kit is enjoyable, nor is it frustrating. Even as a whole W-type killer, she's one of the least problematic. Her players aren't sweaty or toxic, nor are they particularly interesting or funny. She really is just fine. I feel little to no emotion getting this killer in a match, outside of being shocked to see one due to her pick rate. And depending on how my matches have gone that day, seeing a killer that's just kind of there can be a little disappointing, or a bit of a relief. So I think she deserves to sit right in the middle of C tier, and pretty close to the middle of this ranking as a whole. Number 22, the Skull Merchant. I've only played a couple matches against the new merchant, so my experience is very limited here, but she seems completely fine, having gotten some massive improvements as far as enjoyment goes since good old chess merchant. You can now disable as many drones as you need to without being tracked, which is now tied to her scanning instead. Her drones no longer see you as easily and don't expose, now leaving you broken with a claw trap, and you have to crouch periodically in loops to avoid the lines, which is serviceable counterplay, and honestly I could see it being kinda fun to dodge them. I definitely had no problems in my games, though maybe that's partly due to how weak she's become. Number 21, the Doctor. Good old Herman, for me, has a bit of a reverse of Blight and Pig. His power isn't really obnoxious or anything, but it is a little non-interactive and repetitive. It's the type of people that play Doctor that make him a decent opponent. Not due to their mindset or their loadout or anything, they will very much camp and tunnel you, and only really bring two types of builds, full gen slowdown and impossible skill checks. It's the fact that they tend to not exactly be the best players. At least 20% of killer bullying videos are against this character for a reason. He attracts some of the biggest bots in the entire game, and their insistence on shocking combined with below average decisions and mind games can make for some very funny matches. Even good Doctor players aren't that bad to go against, but it's the unusually large number of lower skilled ones that carry him this high up in C tier. And topping off C tier at number 20 is the Twins. Listen, I totally get the Twins hate. I just do not feel the same way. She promotes team play, which also gives me massive autodidact value. Victor is hard but pretty fun to dodge, and it's so funny when you can make him miss, especially if it leads to a kick. She's so buggy that she also just gets a +3 comedy bonus by default. But yes, she is a beast at slugging and camping, which are common strategies for her, and if you're not playing with comms it removes a large portion of her counterplay, so I get it. She's definitely not always fun, but I do have a bit of a soft spot for the Twins. On to B tier, which consists of killers that are generally favourable to match up against, but with some key downsides or just lacking strong engagement. Starting with number 19, the Wraith. Philip is a very simple man. He hides, goes fast, and then gets a big lunge. It's a very inoffensive power, and it can be quite fun to dodge and predict at small loops. And of course, as Noad's number 1 strongest soldier, I do sometimes get that counterforce value. Wraith's only notable issue is the hit and run playstyle. Not only is it just not fun to be denied chase until the killer can guarantee a down on you, but it is very effective when playing solo. Coordinating heals is a pain, and so survivors will exhaust resources out of fear, which creates massive dead zones at 3 gens. One other minor problem is a complete lack of any personality. Wraith players are the closest thing to empty shells that you can encounter in this game. Number 18, the Onryo. Pretty similar to Wraith in some ways, but with differing downsides. I prefer her stealth power, as she can't body block you against objects for free hits, and makes up for her lack of speed with instant map traversal that can be tempered with by survivors. Said traversal being tied to her tapes, which is my favourite part of her kit. Making judgments regarding your condemned progress can be interesting, and even decide the outcome of matches on occasion. Getting chased with high stacks is also super stressful, as not only are you close to being moried, but those stacks will stay on you if you get hooked. However, more bothersome than anything Wraith can do, is her passive phasing similar to Spirit when manifesting, which disorients me really badly and always seems to get me on smaller loops. Also, if you play solo, then at least one of your teammates will inevitably get condemned moried 3 minutes into the match. Number 17, the Plague. I think the Plague is pretty chill, all things considered. She is almost purely an M1 killer with no movement, but in return you have to stay injured with additional noise notifiers. Should you wish to be healthy, you risk giving her more of a temporary power, injuring and downing players with her vomit. It's very threatening, being able to send it pretty far, and even use its drop-off to snag you over the top of obstacles. But the ability to both outlast it and straight up remove it by stunning her makes up for how oppressive it can be and makes chases with it more intense. You can also punish her for getting greedy with her fountains, so while cleansing isn't advised until late game, you do have some options to make the most out of it when the Plague fails to take advantage herself. I like the sound she makes when she swings a weapon too. Aru. That being said, while I don't find anything wrong with the killer's power during gameplay, it does open up some obnoxious scenarios in the perk space. On the survivor's side, it almost completely disables any healing perk or item you have equipped, and this game's matchmaking loves to save all my plague games until I gear my build towards that. On the killer's side, it is infuriatingly common for them to run Thanatophobia, Dying Light, Surge, all the works in one build. That and Plague being one of the worst killers for solo queue due to randoms cleansing and then going back to the gen they were on just to get infected again. Oh, and her incense add-on is obscenely broken. I honestly have no idea how it hasn't changed yet. Otherwise, as far as the base power goes, pretty solid. I like Plague. Number 16, the Trapper. Admittedly, it is just very refreshing to face a weaker, slow-paced killer after 10 matches of high-tier mobility characters, but I honestly think the Trapper has a good bit going for him. Never are you as conscious of the littlest obstructions to the floor as you are against this guy, and changing how you loop to account for where he's trapped can make for some pretty interesting chases. It's also quite enjoyable to keep track of where the Trapper places his traps, as they can exude a lot of personality purely through how they use their power, which is not something that can be said for most characters. I had a match against a Trapper on the FNAF map recently, and I loved that guy for how bold and interesting some of his spots were. You and your teammates getting trapped at the right moment can provide some great comedic value too. Trapper just has two downsides, which are definitely not rare to see. The first are some of his add-ons, mainly Bloody Coil, which forces you to injure yourself and often stay that way just to disarm his traps, and the other is Basement Trapper, which is quite possibly one of the most boring strategies in the entire game. Number 15, the Dredge. Watching these little goofballs go out of their way to set up a remnant play just for you to go to the next tile or make them mess it up is pretty funny. Its awkward head shape leading to some horrid flashlight save attempts can be amusing as well. Its locker TP is also pretty frightening at times, and as your locks dwindle, its games can get so much more difficult and exciting, though this does come with the ability for your random teammates, as usual, to mess things up by double locking or locking in important areas too early. Not that this is nearly as bad as other killers like Plague, just disappointing when it happens. And really the only other thing keeping it chained to B tier is just that as an M1 killer where its only anti-loop encourages you to hold W, it doesn't really do enough to make an impact. A nice little critter though for sure. Number 14, the Death Slinger. I find many crazy Death Slinger shots a lot more impressive than Huntress honestly, and I can also appreciate that they tend to be much more humble about their skill as well. His power, while harder to dodge in my opinion, is also much more rewarding when played against correctly. Should he miss, you're provided with noticeable distance, and he also can't use it on every single pallet or tile due to limited reeling, giving more use to good pallets than against the Huntress and highlighting the importance of good positioning. He also promotes altruistic counterplay with the ability to block speared survivors from being reeled in. Watching toxic or bad teammates get dragged back from the gates gets a good laugh too. Like other projectile killers, he is a great zoner and proxy camper, but really the biggest issue with Deathslinger is that so many of them use the iridescent coin, a very annoying add-on that essentially punishes you for trying to make distance on him, or in other words, punishing you for trying to counter him. Now I'm not a balancing expert, but that's pretty stupid. I think this add-on would still be good if it targeted body blocking instead, by making nearby survivors exposed while someone is chained and having it linger for a short duration. I feel like this would still make it very useful in certain situations, while also allowing survivors to play by the killer's rules in the 1v1. Lastly for B tier at number 13 is the Dark Lord. If Vecna is the evil hybrid power, then Dracula is the angel. He has a movement ability that is very effective but puts restrictions on the killer, allowing survivors to get out of dodge. He has a projectile ability that is much more precise and can be countered with broken line of sight. And he has a secondary chase form that is a slightly more intimidating M1 killer with a mini Wesker dash. All in all, a pretty well-rounded kit, all of which are decently fun to play around, and you have to be very wary of his ability to switch up the flow of the chase by changing forms at any moment. He is a pretty annoying hook camper, which sucks, but he still could have scraped A tier if not for how inconsistent his hellfire can feel. I get the rough idea with its spawn logic, but it's still super difficult to judge in the heat of the moment, and sometimes it just straight up goes through solid walls. Now we get into A tier, with killers that might not be perfect, but there's little reason to assume you won't at least have a solid time. And at number 12, the bottom of A, is the Executioner. Pyramid Head has a strong, skillful power, with fair indicators that make for tense chases relying mostly on reaction time and some level of prediction. Two of the few obnoxious aspects of this character, M2 faking and his crazy tunneling potential, have also received some much needed quality of life changes in the latest PTB, alongside compensation buffs and interesting new add-ons, one of which being a literal sniper rifle. He's still gonna be a hook camping demon, but with this in mind, assuming and mostly hoping that it won't be changed for the live build, I think it's okay for me to barely sneak him into A tier. Editing Shifty here again. I was right. I'm having a good bit of fun with the new Pyramid Head. He would have been around the middle of B tier, but he's pretty cool now. Number 11. The other type of head, the Cenobite. I never had anything against Pinhead, but I definitely appreciate him a lot more after the release of the Houndmaster. He has a mostly unique, interesting power to play around, with his ability to snag you through walls, but only with precise aiming, which can be dangerous, but also very lenient in comparison to Snug, due to the ability to break them in seconds or even instantly on objects or with a teammate, promoting altruism and leaving a lot of room for error on both sides. His box acts as a decent gen slowdown, and there's sometimes a good bit of thinking that goes into when to pick it up and where to solve it. I just wish my solo queue teammates knew when to get the damn thing, because yes, this killer can be a chain-filled nightmare when playing with dreaded randoms. But hey, his voice lines are kinda funny, and Pinhead's skill expression is super underrated. You should see some of the chains people can land when they get used to him. I'm honestly surprised that there are any purely M1 killers that I find good enough for the top tiers, but number 10, the Shape, definitely hits the spot. Even in the worst case scenarios like staying exposed for the entire game, getting backshots from play with your food, or getting choked out at 4 gens, I just cannot hate games against Myers. There's something so automatically silly about this character, and I feel like even when they're trying their absolute hardest, I'm never taking him all that seriously. That's not to say that Michael isn't a scary ass dude though. His stealth is still pretty damn effective all these years later. When you finally see that he's been stalking you, or he jumps you from around a corner, it's very startling, especially because you never know just how close he is to popping his tier 3 on you. And when he does, even if he is just using basic attacks, it gets pretty stressful, with the unseen timer only adding to the pressure. Myers also just has a good selection of add-ons that completely shake up his matches. The Scratched and Vanity Mirrors, which create spooky ambush games while restricting his abilities. The Fragrant Tuft, which makes his early game slow but puts you in plague mode for the rest of the match, and the Tombstone pieces cutting chases short as you make a mad sprint to the nearest interactable. He's just got a lot going on despite his simplicity, and that's great. If it weren't for the map offering nerf gutting the stealth builds, which in turn makes way for the less preferred wave of Tombstone and Infinite, he'd probably be higher up. Not S tier though. Number 9. The Animatronic. It's been over a month since Springtrap released, and I have gone against this character a lot, which is why I'm happy to announce that he's aging pretty well. He's yet another genuinely effective stealth killer, still managing to give me the creeps at times. His doors and their unpredictable spawns can either make a generator the most nerve-wracking thing you can ever work on, or let you kick your legs up and relax. They also allow for quick but very risky map traversal, and while typically not worth the time sink, can be used to help your teammates severely in chase. Like Huntress, he too has a throwable axe which can be used to zone, but unlike Huntress, it actually feels good to play against. He only has one, and once it's gone you don't have to worry about it until he very clearly and audibly retrieves it. So while it's easier to wind up and hit over objects with, it's much more punishing to miss as well. And when they hit some crazy weighted shots, I can't even be mad about it. Like, damn man, I just got shit on. The cloud it leaves behind can provide some different effects to either the survivor or killer with add-ons, and the changes to his movement speed can alter the way you loop against him on the fly, making chases more interesting and encouraging quick thinking. However, while embedded, the axe restricts your interactions and gives the removal of the item priority over unhooking your teammates, making saves extremely hard in a one-man scenario, and making camping and tunneling insane on him, and pretty common too. One last minor thing that brings Springtrap down is that he often isn't looking in the direction that he throws in, which can make it very confusing to predict at times. That aside, they did a great job with this character, and it, alongside another killer yet to be mentioned, gives me some hope for the future of projectile abilities. Number 8. The Mastermind. I'm yet to go against any of those exploiting Weskers that grab you through objects and stuff, so maybe my view on him is a little innocent, but all I see in this killer is a menacing chase power that's fun and intense to play around, with minor gen slowdown and the infection making your looping harder the longer you live, which has its ups and downs when it comes to the actual gameplay. They nerfed his tunneling potential with the infection a lot, but it sure doesn't stop him from trying. You also don't really have to worry about teammates eating up spray bottles, since you get so many and there's rarely a reason not to use them. I like how when he messes up his attacks he actually gets punished by often being flung far from you, as opposed to many other dash killers that tend to just endure a 2-second cooldown while standing in licking distance. Wesker is very stupid as a character in this game due to how unintimidating his design and dialogue is, but I think they made the most of it. Yes, Albert, I am trying to make you angry. Number 7. The Nemesis. Doesn't quite provide the same engagement with his chase power, but more than makes up for it with how fun Nemesis and his players tend to be. I just find him hilarious. His animations, some of the weird noises he makes, and his brainless zombies have some great comedic potential. Nemesis players are some of the strongest little demons in the whole game, and when they have a problem with you, they will let you know all about it. Sometimes when I get punched by him, it startles me even though I know it's coming because of how loud the hit sound is, and he undoubtedly has the best chase theme in the whole game. While I did diss his power a little, it's still a good time trying to delay his tear-ups and make him fumble at windows and pallets by missing or respecting it way too much. You're gonna have to be the one trying to keep him in tier 1 though, cause your random teammates sure won't, as they run at him in the first 10 seconds and then hog all the vaccines as soon as they get infected. On the flip side, I once had a teammate that refused to use vaccines despite none of them being gone yet, him being on death hook, and barely anyone else was getting down by the killer. He died because of that, and when I asked him why, he just said he doesn't believe in that garbage, as if the fictional jabs were going to give us survivors microchips. And the final killer to barely miss out on the S rank, number 6, the Cannibal. Good old Bubba is like Nemesis, but enhanced 5 times over. This character is inherently unserious due to player stereotypes, his dumbass sound effects, and being another one of those killers that tends to attract people that are below average, making up at least 30% of the other survivor videos that aren't taken up by the doctor. These guys somehow have so much personality even when they aren't meaning to show any. And it's not just player related either, his power is really enjoyable to be chased by at times, and definitely has you clenching your cheeks as you hug obstacles as tightly as possible or try to time a locker juke. He's also got a pretty harmless and sweet meme playstyle in Chest Protector Bubba. Chase and players combined, he is absolutely S tier material. It's just that he's sadly able to guarantee kills on hook even after the camping changes, and it's still very boring when it happens, at least early on. I don't think that camping should be removed from Bubba, as it can be the cherry on top of an already hilarious match, but their insistence on doing so, sometimes making their entire build around it, rather than it being a reaction to how the game has gone so far, is why I love Bubba, but don't always love facing him. And finally, the S tier, full of enjoyable, nearly flawless characters that I am always excited to see. And starting the countdown for the top 5 is the Oni. One of the game's biggest snowball killers, Oni puts a huge amount of pressure on your M1 chase performance to delay his incredibly scary, game-changing power, which is what makes his matches so tense and exhilarating. The power itself is very oppressive, but you can still predict and play around it if you act carefully, adding to the fun of this killer as you try to last as long as possible, knowing he might go back to his M1 if you just dodge a couple more demon strikes. Finding strategic places to heal up to avoid giving him more orbs is also a key part of playing against this killer well. I would give him a higher placement, but as usual, solo queue kind of ruins it. Communicating healing and expecting your teammates to do well in the early game is what's going to do you in against the Oni, and when you play against a never-ending Wrathfest, it isn't quite as fun for you. So I think Oni is great, but randoms are too unpredictable for him to be anywhere above the bottom of the S tier. Number 4, the Ghostface. Like Myers and some of the other killers talked about so far, his matches are elevated by the stress of having to outlast a timed ability. But unlike those other killers, when you hear that stinger sound, you know he's not going to go after anyone but you, and you better make sure you don't slip up. You can also tell when he has you on high stalk by the way he refuses to play tiles normally or hit you, which can add to the worry. And also like Myers, his stealth can be quite frightening, but without having to rely on add-ons or the early game, and instead just being able to activate it whenever he wants to. It's amusing to take him out of stalk while he thinks he's being sneaky, and his players have a lot of personality, being some of the most casual in the game. Being able to spam teabags as a killer is huge. It's also nice to not have to worry about getting exposed because some idiot on your team was examining the bark on a tree. It's almost always on you for not catching him out. Number 3, the Hillbilly. These are some of the game's most respectably skilled players, but unlike Blight mains, they actually like to have fun in their matches instead of sweat maxing. A lot of personality on these guys too, willing to do things playfully and subtle brag on their best shots. Even when injured, most billies will try to chainsaw you just because it's stylish and fun for them. And it sure is fun for the survivors too, trying to predict the way in which he'll curve his saw, knowing that in all honesty, very few obstacles and tiles are actually safe from being completely decimated on. He's one of the few really strong killers that I love playing against, as I find his strength genuinely well designed. If they brought back Space Billy, I could definitely see an argument for him being right at the top, but without it, he's still really cool. Number 2, the Unknown. The Unknown's marketing was a contributing factor as to why I came back to DBD briefly in 2024. After a long string of poor or simply serviceable attempts at horror with the exception of the Dredge, they finally made another genuinely creepy killer that was advertised accordingly. I was a little worried how he'd play, but I am pleased to say that he was not let down by his gameplay at all. His randomly placed TPs can make for good scares and make each match against him feel more unique with how they end up interacting with loops and objectives. The goop he shoots is dangerous and unpredictable, requiring good prediction and reaction time to dodge, making chases more exciting as you try to keep from being weakened. And while it does get you killed, it's pretty damn funny running into walls because you're trying too hard to keep an eye on him. And finally, my number one favorite killer in Dead by Daylight, probably no surprise to some people since it's been pretty well liked since it came out, is the Demogorgon. Due to the ability to manually set up portals, different Demogorgons will cover different objectives and areas, as well as try to hide their portals in different ways, or just not try at all, making no two matches against it feel the same. And it's another one of those abilities that gives a little bit of insight into the mind of the killer. And then as survivor you get the option to disable its portals, which depends on the situation. If a portal is close by, it will reveal you to the demo, but ones that are further can be left alone to not alert them that you're there. In fact, portals that aren't pressuring important objectives can be ignored entirely, as without an add-on, the demo has no way to get it back. In my opinion this should be changed, but punishing the killer for not making the portals feel like they're worth sealing due to lack of pressure or poor placement can be quite satisfying. Its chase power is simplistic in both its mechanics and counterplay, and thrives on this simplicity. Dealing with its fast lunge often relies on mind games and quick thinking, and when they miss by a hair you feel simultaneously triumphant and a little spooked. It's a very fair 1v1 chase power, intimidating definitely but not overbearing. Demo can zone you like some other killers, but has to maintain an actual path to the player instead of doing it over obstacles like most killers. And pallets and windows are a hard stop to any pressure it has on you should you make one, so instead of being annoying, it's more of a "ah damn, I probably shouldn't have played that greedy." Demo also has super atmospheric sound effects and some great animations, which just makes me appreciate being in a match with it even more. And to top it off, they're another killer where the players tend to drip with personality and a casual energy, willing to take some time to enjoy the match and mess around. A basic pick, yeah, but Demo is and likely always will be, unless Space Billy returns, the most fun character to match up against in this game. Part of it is just the relief of playing against a low pick rate, mediocre strength killer that doesn't excel at annoying strategies, sure, but they could buff this handsome creature 5 different ways and I'd still adore it. So thank you to anyone who continues to play Demogorgon, no matter how much it gets power crept. And that is my full list of all the killers in DBD from least to most fun. Of course, it's still possible to have nice games against the most annoying killers and for them to play fair, and it's still possible to have horrible games against really fun killers and for them to play nasty, but this is generally how I feel about each character. If you agree or disagree with my rankings, let me know all about it in the comments. I'm happy to see people's perspectives. And if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, and sub to my second channel if you specifically want DBD content, because while I wouldn't mind making more in the future, especially if this one does well, I don't want to clog my main channel with it. Something I'm interested to try is spending some time learning to play these killers that I'm not a fan of and hoping that it lets me grow to appreciate or better counter their kits. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.